24 hours. If you're not out of here, the stock's going to get burnt down.
This is the wild story of Australia's tobacco wars. It's a story about a country that went to war with smoking, but it spectacularly backfired in an extremely violent way after the government drastically raised the tax on cigarettes, rolling tobacco and vapes. The trade largely went underground.
Well, it's on like Donkey Kong in Melbourne at the moment. I mean, every day we wake up and there's another firebombing of a nightclub, a shop, a restaurant.
According to the government themselves, Australians now spend $8.5 billion a year on illicit nicotine products. That's more than weed, coke, MDMA and heroin combined. That's big business for dealers, with less penalties than the illegal drugs. The result is that a violent power struggle is now playing out on the streets as criminal factions tussle for control of this insanely lucrative black market trade. Over the past few years, thousands of tobacconists have been extorted, hundreds have been firebombed, and major players in the smuggling world have been kidnapped. Border security cannot handle the avalanche of illegal nicotine products that are flowing into the country on a daily basis. The streets have become a war zone, people are being murdered, and the government is losing out on billions of dollars worth of revenue. So I looked into exactly how Australia's tobacco wars came about.
Tobacco wars.
Tobacco war.
Tobacco war. Brace for an escalation of violence in Melbourne's tobacco war.
The crisis started with a policy that was designed to improve public health by making cigarettes and tobacco more expensive. And when it came to vapes, they were taxed highly as well, being really expensive, and you had to get a prescription for a vape and you can only get them from pharmacies. The result is the country has some of the most expensive nicotine products in the world.
At least 60% of smokers and an incredible 95% of vapers buy their cigarettes and vapes at illegal outlets, and here's why. This packet of legal cigarettes will cost you $50. $30 of that is excise tax. This illegal packet is $16. It costs the criminals as little as 30 cents to produce it.
According to the government, less people than ever are using nicotine products in Australia. Recent data from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare revealed that in 2025, the prevalence of people who smoke was 5.6%. That, they say, is down from 8.3% in 2022-2023, which would be a record low. So harm reductionists across the country should be celebrating, right? Well, it's actually an unclear picture. The government stats come from a self-reported survey, and even the Australian Institute for Health and Welfare concede themselves that people who respond to these surveys tend to underestimate actual consumption levels, particularly when it comes to illegal black market nicotine products. And as the price of cigarettes increased, illicit dealers drastically undercut the official product, putting much of the trade underground. So the steepest fall in smoking, according to the government, just happens to coincide with a huge move from legal above-board nicotine products towards underground, unregulated ones, meaning usage overall is much more difficult to measure. And according to a recent analysis by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, it's a very different picture. Their research used techniques including testing wastewater for the metabolites of nicotine, and it concluded that Australians are consuming more nicotine than they were 8 years ago, but they are spending less money on it. They say that the amount of nicotine consumed around the country soared by 40% between 2017 and last year, despite a population growth of just 14%. In 2017, only 12% of the total tobacco consumed was from illicit sources, but by last year that had risen to 80%. Today's video is brought to you by Easy Test Kits, quick, reliable and affordable drug testing kits for all your favourite party prescriptions. If you want to learn more or grab, say, an MDMA or a ket or a coke testing kit, then click in the description below and use my promo code SESH for a 10% discount. There's a cost of living crisis in Australia at the moment, but the dollar household spending on nicotine products is similar to what it was in 2016, even though the legal nicotine products have at least tripled in price. And the price of illegal products has remained roughly the same. According to the government themselves, Australians now spend $8.5 billion a year on illegal nicotine products. That's more than weed, coke, MDMA and heroin combined, not to mention that it's less penalties if you're busted compared to if you were smuggling or dealing in illegal drugs. And that's how the tobacco wars started. Various underground factions started fighting over turf in which to sell nicotine products. The government started losing billions in tax and the situation spiralled out of control. As more Australians lit up cheap cigarettes without health warnings on the packs, tobacconists started getting extorted, various players were being kidnapped, and the trade was linked to murders.
Innocent businesses caught in the crossfire of Melbourne's escalating tobacco wars. More than 10 stores destroyed.
Good evening. Melbourne's underworld tobacco war has roared back to life with a suspected foot soldier gunned down in a daylight shooting in Coolaroo.
A much-loved Melbourne performer has been revealed as the innocent victim of a botched firebombing in Melbourne's west.
The turf wars between the various groups who are taking advantage of this situation in order to generate vast profits have resulted in not just firebombings but ram raids, kidnaps, extortion and multiple murders. And civilians not involved in the trade have been caught in the crossfire. One example is last year when at around 2 AM, two men firebombed a house in Melbourne. Unfortunately, they tragically got the wrong address, and 27-year-old 𝙬𝙤𝙠𝙚, a performer who was house sitting for her brother, died after the emergency services were unable to save her. The Australian border security are completely overwhelmed when it comes to illegal nicotine products coming into the country. It's tons and tons every single day. The strategy that the smugglers are using is to just completely overwhelm the authorities, and the profit margins are so high that they can afford to lose loads of shipments as long as some get through.
I can't even count the number of boxes of these behind us here. It just goes back as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, well, this particular consignment was around then 8.8 million sticks. So significant volume. You're probably talking close to a full 20-foot container's worth of cigarettes just in this one consignment.
According to this study, people involved can often enjoy a 1,177% return on investment on a container of illicit tobacco which is bought cheaply in Asia. A legal importer, however, is looking at more like a 16% return on investment. And up until recently, the risks were quite minimal for that sort of money. The same study said, quote, "We have been informed that cocaine with a street value of $2.3 million in Australia would have cost about $150,000 to import, with heroin being similar price. The penalty for smuggling both is prison for sure, whereas smuggling tobacco costs also around $150,000 to import, with a street value of $10 million in Australia, which under current sentencing guidelines would generally just result in a modest fine. And if that container of tobacco gets through, the smuggler makes millions and the government loses about $14.5 million in tax. In 2011-12, the federal government pocketed $16.3 billion from tax from nicotine products. Last year, that was just $7.1 billion, a drop of more than 50%. But that study was in 2024, and the situation with penalties for people caught smuggling tobacco have massively increased recently. 2 months ago, the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, introduced a new penalty for landlords of shops selling illegal tobacco. It was the latest in a number of reforms to respond to the tobacco wars, including a new offence for the possession of a commercial quantity of illicit tobacco, which has now a maximum penalty of $1.5 million and 7 years in prison, or both. In Victoria, anyone found selling illicit tobacco now under new penalties will face a fine of up to $370,000 or up to 15 years in prison. Experts in public health or criminology in Australia cannot agree on whether the tax should be reduced on the legal nicotine products to bring people back to the legal market, or whether they should just really increase the penalties for anyone dealing in illicit tobacco. Some people also think that vapes should be more readily available as they are a less harmful way of consuming nicotine. Their tax should be less on that, and they should be not only available through private prescriptions. However, the Australian authorities try and clean up this mess. It seems that the trade, with tons and tons of the product coming into the country every day, does not seem to be going anywhere. And with almost 300 firebombing incidents since 2023, and on top of that, routine extortion, violence and power struggles, it seems like the turf war isn't going anywhere either. If you find these videos useful or interesting, follow me, hit the bell notification, and I'll see you on the next one.